Hello everyone and welcome to another video with me, 320 Sim Pilot, and today we're taking a look at the fantastic Antonov 225, the world's largest aircraft when it was flying. Sadly it has now been destroyed earlier in 2022, but hopefully we will see a return of the 225 at some point in the future. It is a remarkable machine that holds many records, including the highest landing weight. It has a maximum takeoff weight of up to 640 tons, which is truly something amazing. Originally designed in the Soviet era, it was supposed to carry spacecraft for the Soviet space program. It later on started taking outside transport all around the world, and I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it or have seen or heard of it. It is a remarkable machine, no doubt. It's iconic for its 6 turbofan engines, which is not something we see very often, and that fantastic tail design. Nice to see such a practical aircraft take such a pretty shape in the sky. I really like it. Partly necessitated by having to move the tail fin out of the way, because the idea was to have a big space shuttle or other sort of spacecraft mounted onto the back of it. This has been brought out by Any Simulations and Microsoft. It is available on the Microsoft Store, and in today's video we're going to look through it, see what it's like if you're thinking of picking it up, show you the sort of things that you might want to do with it. It's a complicated add-on in some respects, although it isn't a full systems simulation of the Antonov 225. It does still have plenty of systems and certainly a lot to learn. So in today's video I'm going to do it slightly differently. I'll be taking us sort of the simple route through to show you how you might get up and running on your first few flights with it, to see if that's the sort of thing you'd be interested in. And in my opinion it's something you should be interested in, because it's really very good. The visual model and the systems in it are great fun, although it is certainly challenging at times to use. I'm going to be flying it on a sort of short hop out of East Midlands, and we're going to take a look at, like I say, the sort of simple startup and some of the simple parts of flying it. I'm a real-world Airbus pilot, so I'll be comparing it and giving you a bit of context on flying large aircraft, but needless to say this is a lot larger than any aircraft I've flown. A typical Airbus aircraft range in their maximum takeoff weight, but a 320 is in the sort of 70-75 ton region. 321s are up in the sort of 90 ton region. Remember, this is 640 tons, really quite remarkable. I also want to say thank you to Jonathan Beckett for his videos on the Antonov 225, which has helped me get to grips with the Autopilot. I'll provide a link in the description to that. Right, let's get started. I'd like to point out that the proceeds from the sale of this from the Microsoft Flight Simulator store will be sent to the Antonov Corporation, is my understanding, at least from what Microsoft has said, and in order for their efforts to rebuild the Antonov 225. So that is worth noting if you're thinking of picking this up. Here are the liveries. So there's the 3 unrealistic liveries down here. We've got the Microsoft and Xbox ones, and then here's a Be Brave like Ukraine livery, and then the more modern liveries, as well as some of the older ones. So we're going to use the more modern Be Brave Ukraine livery for today's video. So here we are looking at the aircraft configuring into the loading configuration. Now this is really easy to do in Microsoft Flight Simulator. They've provided an EFB option for us, which is really great. This is of course a key part of the Antonov 225, and it's really been taken seriously, as you can see in this model, which is really nice. So now you can see the legs coming down, because this aircraft does of course kneel down to get the nose down, which is quite an unusual and complex thing for an aircraft to do, but it's been simulated here. Now it does take a long time in the real aircraft, and of course they had a specialist who was there to oversee it and organize it, but luckily we don't need to learn the engineering panels and so on to be able to do this. We can just do it through the EFB, which I'll show you in just a moment. But as you can see, they've taken it seriously. We've got proper modeling of the animations and the parts involved, and this is a familiar sight to anyone who's looked up videos of the Antonov 225 in the past. Really amazing thing. Just while we're here, have a look at the texturing and the difference in the model on the underside of the aircraft. You can see each line of rivets and the way it's slightly indented in the metal. Really nice and lovely texturing. We'll see more of the visual model throughout the video, but I'm really impressed with it. It totally buys that idea that this is a well thought out and well made add-on for Microsoft Flight Simulator. And there you go, look at that. Absolutely spectacular sight, and it's an amazing thing. I particularly like the detail here, which I've never noticed on the real aircraft before, is these little panels that open up as the fuselage hinges, because of course the skin otherwise would scrape together. So really nicely done. Now, how do we enable this? Well, all you have to do is from the flight deck, you can actually go to the ground tab, and all I did was click on the main door, and you can see it then ran this. There's a green bar here that runs as the door opens. Now the legs have extended, and now it is in the kneeling process. Now, is it still kneeling, or is it just It is very slowly. You can just about see it is kneeling down. It will do it slowly, and that's what this bar is now progressing through. It is a long process, like I say. You can also do the passenger area lights and cargo bay lights, and I've already done the cabin door here, which if we go outside, that was actually on the other side, and that's what's giving us these legs here. So while we allow it to kneel, and you can see it's starting, these nose gears are actually rolling forward. And this is the bit that really excites me about this aircraft. But we're going to take it into the air, of course. You can see them actually rolling slightly. Yeah, very cool. As we move down the fuselage, it's just spectacularly massive. Obviously, having those 6 jet engines really makes it into a sight to behold. But what I particularly like is the main landing gear. Look at this. There's 32 wheels on this aircraft of total, as we mentioned. And yeah, all modelled, present and correct. The animations on these are great as well as we get it into the air. But yeah, what an absolute beast. And a fantastic model. You can really enjoy looking around. The texturing is super as well, really nicely done. The wing flex is there as well, so you can see them sort of heavily drooping down. They're drooping down naturally, but this aircraft has such huge wings that they do actually flex up. You often see on cargo or high wing aircraft a slight anhedral, which is where those wings point down towards the end, and that is designed to increase the maneuverability of the aircraft. But yeah, really nice. And here's that massive tail separated at the side so that it can carry cargo in front of the or in the center line of the aircraft. So cargo would sit here. It would interfere with the airflow over the tail, so by moving those tail fins to the side, it removed that problem. So some neat pieces of engineering going on here with this fantastic machine. So let's let it kneel down into the cargo configuration, and then we'll take another look at loading it up, because that is of course what we want to do with it. So finally, a fair few minutes later, we have the last part of the loading happening. So now the ramp fully unloads. You can see that the wheels have now kneeled down. The forward cargo door is fully open, and yeah, it's great. You get to really experience the aircraft's the key feature. You can see as well they have modelled the cabin, which is really nice, or the cargo hold, I suppose I should call it. And you've got those spare wheels that it famously carries, of course. It's got to be quite self-sustaining. It has its own pushback tow bar here, because of course it has to have double pushback, because it's got 2 nose wheel struts at the front. So that's quite something. And then you can have the cargo. So at the moment we've got sort of this big crate of pallets with lots of boxes in it. Not particularly exciting, and there are more exciting options available. So let's take a look at what those are. By the way, you can also see they've modelled its crane system inside. Really quite something. Absolutely great. Lots and lots of details here. So if we jump into the flight deck, we get an interesting problem, which is that now it's kneeled, our camera position is no longer in the right place. So this is a bit of a stretch, but what we can do is we can look down here, and I can go to select the cargo by moving along, and you can see unload cargo, load cargo. So if I want to, I wonder if I can just load it on. So let's do something a bit more interesting. We can take 3 helicopters, we can take a big boiler, or we can take some trains. I think a train would be quite good. So let's load that on. Let's see what happens if we do that. Cargo loaded. There we go. So now we have a train inside. But you can only do that when the aircraft is in the loading configuration. So I'm going to leave that there. Let's see what it looks like if we take a couple of helicopters. Let's try that. Yes, look at that. Fantastic. 3 helicopters. Absolutely amazing. So this aircraft has a huge cargo capacity. Obviously, it's what it's built for. So now we have to go through the process in reverse. Now we've got it all loaded up. So let us close the main door. And this is going to take a while. So I'll see you on the other side once that is all done, the reverse operation, and we are underway. So there we are now, fully loaded, cargo door closed again. Let's get this fantastic machine started up and out and into the air. It's really quite an interesting experience getting this aircraft underway, as you'll see inside the flight deck. It also is great fun to get it flying, just because it's such an iconic aeroplane, and it's a real treat to see it take to the virtual skies. So let's jump in. So here we are on the flight deck, and there are a huge number of differences over aircraft that I have flown and of course aircraft that we've seen in simulators before. One big thing to note is that a lot of this markings are of course in Cyrillic, which is the language that it is it was originally put together using with the labels. You can in the EFB change the Cockpit language to English, but Please note that this does not change everything, as I discovered. For some reason, I sort of thought it would change all of the writing. It actually changes certain things only. So you'll run into trouble in some areas. But you can see here, so for example, meters changes, some of the autopilot controls up here, such as course and so on. These things do change. They're not entirely obvious what they are even so. So you put it back into English, and you'll see that it goes to sort of navig approach, course 1, course 2. So it definitely helps, but it is still not the an intuitive aircraft in lots of senses, mainly because it's so different in the way it was put together. Now there are, I'm sure, already lots of great tutorials out there. I've been using one which I'll provide a link in the description, which has helped me get my head around this aircraft a little bit. Something I highly recommend is that you enable the, if I go to the general options and then accessibility, and then I have instrument name tooltips instant, because without that I found it really difficult, because like I say, some things do change into English and some things don't, such as these fuel pumps and so on. Now it's entirely possible to start up this aircraft using the interactive checklists, which is quite a long process. As you can see, there's 35 items in the electrical power up, and the fuel and hydraulic setup there's 74. But for this video, I'm going to keep it simple, and I'm actually going to show you that you can get this aircraft flying without having to learn all that. It is a lot to learn, even to go through that checklist and do every switch. If you want the satisfaction of doing it, you can, which is great. Not everything is modeled, so as we move around, things like engine heaters, they are modeled, but things like whatever these dials do are not. And I wish I knew, but I don't. And this aircraft was obviously designed to operate with a lot more crew than one person. You've got 2 pilots and then 4 seats. You've got sort of navigators and engineers, as well as a flight engineer. But yeah, so some things work, fuel pumps, for example, hydraulics and so on. But we're going to use the inbuilt system, which allows us to, by the way, in settings, you can also have metric, kilograms. You can change the altitude window. So I'm going to put that into hundreds because you'll see why. And the nose door movement speed, realistic and fast. So that long time to load it, you can actually make a bit better or a bit more useful. So they put some nice options there. I say useful, just a bit more practical for you to use in the simulator. You've also got a converter. So a lot of things in this aircraft are done in meters. For example, need to click on something else to get out of that. Yeah, so for example, as you can see, our speed is in kilometers an hour. The altitude selector window, which is what this sort of is 1,000 meters. It's in meters. So you'd need to potentially convert these things, which you can do in here, which is pretty useful. I'm going to go to ground and check that everything is in order. It is. We can close up that cabin door now, turn off the lights down in the cargo bay. And you can see here now we can't change that because we're not in the loading configuration. And if we go to the dashboard, you can actually set up your flight or load it in from the GPS. And I'm going to try out this ready to fly button. I've not used it yet. Auto start procedure running. So here you go. You can actually get the airplane to power up for you, which is, yeah, a lot of simmers might feel like this is cheating. But I have spent a long time just trying to get my head around the other parts of this aircraft in the air, and the startup procedure is incredible. On the overhead panel down here, you can see we've got our warning panel. Now this is in English, but it would be in Cyrillic if you had the setting changed as well, and there's another sort of version of that along here, which currently says engine failures. If we jump outside, you'll see that the engines are starting up for us, which is really nice. Let me put the flaps up. But yeah, so now our hydraulic systems come online. You can see the strobe lights on as well. Really great modelling and animations all around though. There's no denying this is a great looking add-on. Very happy with it. You can also see that sort of smoke, the trademark smoke coming out the back of the engines. I'm not actually sure specifically what causes that on some sort of engines. You can see it on even Airbus aircraft, but obviously just not to the same extent. And certainly not on Neos and things like that, but yeah, it's something that is a feature, and it's very noticeable on the Antonov 225, and it's great to see it modelled in this version of it. So for my throttles, this is how I've got it set up, as throttle 1 does engine 1 and 2, and then throttle my second thrust lever does engine 3 and 4, and that seems to have worked for me so far in terms of having 1 to 3 on one and 4 to 6 on the other. So it's effectively a twin engine for me now, which is good enough really. So let's get ourselves moving. Now where the taxi light is a great question. But luckily it does have, as we saw earlier, the full checklists. So if we go to after engine start, you can see taxi light. Let's have a look. These are the taxi lights. Now, are they on? That is a great question. I'm going to hope that means that they are on. Let's get ourselves out. Luckily it's a big machine, so we can swing that wing over the top of this truck. Now as we taxi out, you'll notice a few things. We do have a normal sort of horizontal situation indicator down here, and the artificial horizon is quite traditional in its sense of operation. We can actually, as it's getting a bit hot in here, move the fan to point at our face, which is really great. Such a good detail. And the fan switch is this one here. There we go. Absolutely brilliant. Love that feature. We've also got our flight control indicators down here. So that's the rudders. 2 rudders there, moving full left and full right. We can do the elevators full up, full down, and the roll left, right, and then you've got the roll spoilers as well. The flaps are shown over here. As you can see, a huge presence on the ground. So we've got our full flaps out. If you look at the flight controls, or a large amount of roll spoilers, funnily enough. Aileron way out there at the tip, but roll spoilers pretty much all the way along the wing, which is quite an interesting way of doing it. And then you've got the rudders. There's actually 2 parts to both rudders, top and bottom, and then elevators as well. At full lock, it does sort of run out of steam, so you do have to keep it moving. But yeah, pretty manoeuvrable. Feels like a big heavy machine on the ground, which is sort of what you want from an add-on like this. I like that a lot. Now, goodness only knows if I've got the lights in the correct position. We seem to have some lights on, which I'm going to take as a big success. The strobe light seems to be running, and I think we have nav lights. We do, so we'll say that's going well. And let's get ourselves onto the runway. Once we're on the runway, I'm going to show you a little bit of setup of the automatics and how I'm going to have that set up just for the way I want to fly it. But really, like I say, this is just to get a taste of the aircraft in the air and then enjoy it. Because it's a lot to learn if you're planning to do it properly, which you absolutely can. But yeah, I'm not going to be able to do that today for you, I'm afraid. Just reset to that position. There we go. Right. Get ourselves over onto the runway. It's all clear on the approach. If you've seen the videos of this aircraft from the flight deck, they are really amazing. The amount of coordination, the amount of communication between all the crew members required. It's just fantastic, a real sight to behold. So with the flaps at full, you'll see we actually have a speed limit needle here, which does move with the flap position. So there you go, or the flap selector perhaps. But yeah, we've got them at full, which it doesn't feel natural to me, but the checklist says 35 degrees, which as far as I can see is full. But there we go. And they are pretty heavy, so let's get ourselves lined up. But I don't want to use up too much runway rolling along. Look at that. It's glorious. Such a great model. I'm going to set the parking brake, which is pretty traditional, pretty easy to use. And what we're going to do now is just set up some of this sort of flight guidance panel, as it were. So speed, I want to have this set to sort of 250 knots. I'm going to initially climb away at below 10,000 feet. So let's go to the converter and put in a speed conversion of 250 knots, which is 463 kilometers per hour, which is pretty quick. So to do that, you can drag this off to the right, and this is actually moving the speed bug down on the airspeed indicator. So let's get it all the way up to, what did we say? We said 463. And this is one thing I've noticed, is that this stuff can take a while. All these dials are very incremental control, so that's something you do get used to. That's why it's handy that you can change the altimeter to be, or the altitude selector to be in hundreds. Otherwise you're doing the same thing where it's doing it in ones and it takes forever, or tens. But yeah, so let's put this in 460, so we can just we're going to head straight out, clean up to 250 knots. So I'm going to do this. This is the speed selector for the auto throttle system. So 463. In terms of altitude, I'm going to climb up to 5,000 feet initially. So that you can pretty much times it by 3. So let's put in 5,000 feet, which is 1,524 meters. Remember to click off. So when you've selected a box, it will actually stop you doing anything else, and you can just click off to get it. So 1,524. So we'll get as close to that. So that's actually pretty high up there. So we'll come down to 1,500. Let's do 1,600 meters. I'm going to. So that's a good speed, a good altitude to aim for. Now I want to get the heading bug to be pointing down the runway. We're pointing sort of east. My heading bug is actually over here at the moment. To move the heading bug, you use this red dial. So you've got to get the camera in the right position, and then I can as you can see, scroll the dial round and get it pointing our way. So I can get it into sort of a heading mode once we are underway. Good. As we can see, the flaps are now down at full. The throttles are in idle. I'm going to arm the speed brake, which as far as I can tell means doing that, putting it forward. Again, not written down. So this stuff is pretty much guesswork. There is a GPS, the built-in sort of flight sim GPS, but we're just going to use it for sort of rough situational awareness today. I'm not planning to use it for the actual flights particularly. Now, I can't tell you exactly what this stuff is, but I will tell you that I'm going to tune in Nav 1 1157, which, as you can see here, is identified as the Trent VOR with a course of 133. So we're going to take off, accelerate to 250, but also intercept the 133, and I'm going to see if I can get it to track that radial down at 5,000 feet. And then we'll break off, come back round, and fly the ILS back into East Midlands. It should be a nice day for it. So we got a tune of the VOR. We can see here there is actually a DME, but that's not quite registering, but that should hopefully we get a kilometers distance once we're in the air, which is pretty cool. But I think this might be a DME over here. We shall find out. So many parts of this. Like I say, there are other better, if you need instruction videos out there. I'm just sort of talking through some of the things in case you're interested and you're thinking of picking up this aircraft. This is the autopilot control. So on here we'll see a few modes, such as getting the autopilot on and the auto thrust system on, and then getting to fly heading and so on. We'll do that once we're underway. So for taking off, as far as I can tell, if we go to the checklists and I go to takeoff, we're going to have, like I say, 35 degrees of flap, release the brakes, go to full power, rotate as required. I don't have any evidence of when that should be, but we'll do something sensible. And then at 10 meters, we raise the gear effectively, and 50 meters, we can turn off the lights. So not too strenuous. And then we're going to accelerate and retract the flaps. And as we accelerate and get close to this barber's pole, we need to bring them in. And then we'll get ourselves underway. Good stuff. So I think it's time we get going. So here we go then, full power, advancing all those thrust levers, which is just great. Holding it on the toe brakes, parking brake released, and there's full power. Now I don't know, but I'm imagining this fade at control because it doesn't seem to have an issue going full power. I'll let you enjoy the sounds a little bit, and we're underway. Pretty good performance out of it, out of those 6 engines. I've had no trouble with it, even with the cargo loads, although I haven't fueled it up fully to see what it's really like. We know 250 knots is about 460, so 230 would be somewhere in the 125 knots region. So let's get ourselves up to sort of 300s, maybe 250 is enough. I'm going to raise the nose gently, I don't want it to go too far up, plenty of energy there, positive climb, gear up, and it's climbing away nicely. Right, let's bring the flaps in one stage. If you go too keen on the pitch, it does soon run out of energy with all those flaps out. Like I say, we're nowhere near the max takeoff weight at this point, I don't think. So bringing the flaps in a stage, you see that bar moves forwards. Now, I realise my mistake now. I need to put this to VOR1. And I need to select Captain VOR1. And now I get the VOR1 needle down there. Okay, already a few technical difficulties, but we are now in the air. We are climbing and we are turning to intercept that VOR. So let me just get the camera right. There we go. I don't know why it's resetting. So we're intercepting the 133. So let's roll out here. Let's get the nose down so we don't get too slow. A bit more power on. In terms of hand flying, it's quite light on the roll, much more than I thought it would be. The pitch is also pretty good, so it does feel like a very conventional sort of aeroplane considering the size. I had expected it to be a bit more heavy or sluggish, and I can't help but wonder if the reason for the high roll rate is to do with the large amount of roll spoilers. But yeah, it's very pleasant to fly. It's much more manoeuvrable than you would imagine, and certainly more manoeuvrable than some even general aviation aircraft. But there we go, we are now, I say manoeuvrable, it handles, but it still uses a lot of distance to do things, obviously. Yeah, we're on the 133 now, and as you can see, we are currently 27 DME out, or 50 kilometers, so that's pretty cool, and you can see the arrow pointing behind us. So yeah, very nice. So let's try and get some automatics in and get the airplane fully cleaned up. We still have some flaps out. So first of all, I'm going to press the autopilot sort of master switch, which now locks the pitch and the wings level. Then I'm going to enable the auto throttle to target our 463. So that's going to drive the throttle system up. So that's the AT button. I'm going to bring the flaps up a stage. I remember it's just holding the pitch, but that happens to be quite a good pitch. And then flaps up fully. Next, I'm going to make sure it wants to level off at 1600. So I'm going to enable the vertical mode button. And that way it will climb, as you'll see. Let's set the pitch wheel to something sensible. Oh, it's done it already. There we go. 1600 meters. It's reached it. And you can see the little blue light altitude light button has come on. What I could have done as well is press VY. And it would have gone into mode according to this pitch. But we'll use that to descend. So we're now at our sort of 5,000 feet. And we're doing 463 kilometers an hour. So about 250 knots, 5,000 feet, which is quite a sensible place to be. So that's all very good. We're clean. We've got the gear up. Happy days. Now, we are just in a wings level mode, so I want to get that into heading. We know we have our heading bug set over there, which is on runway heading. I can actually spin that around to sort of match us as we head away. So let's bring it slightly over to the right and then get it into a heading mode. So to do that, I can simply press the blue button now. I'll put this to course 1 and select the blue button, and now it's going to roll over to follow the heading bug. And a huge thank you to Jonathan Beckett for his videos on this, which have been a massive, massive help. So now we're turning towards that heading bug. I can actually get it to fly the course of the VOR. So if I put it to VOR 1, and if I then repress the blue button, it should intercept that course bar, and we're going to use that later on to fly the INS, essentially. So there we go. If we want to climb, let's say we want to go up to 2,200 meters, I'm going to put 2,200 in. I'm going to increase the pitch wheel a little bit, and then I'm going to press VY. No, that's wrong. Okay. I'm going to put 2,200 meters, and then I'm going to press H3. There we go. And it should now pitch up in accordance with what I've selected here. So if I now drag the wheel up, it'll drive the nose up. Yeah, so I was completely wrong on it. It's not VY. It's the H3 button. There we go. And you can sort of scroll that up and down to adjust the pitch, and then because the auto thrust is in, that's going to try and maintain the speed. Very basic systems. There's no sort of, as far as I can tell, flight level change mode or anything like that. This is a pretty raw data, direct control of things. But that does work. It works okay. It works okay because this is a vertical speed you're scrolling with here, so that's perfectly acceptable and quite a nice way to fly airplanes. Certainly, there's plenty of aircraft out there without these things. You have a sort of FMA down here. We've got on CD course stabilization. I don't really know what that's telling me, I'm afraid. I'm going to disarm the spoilers now, and what we'll do is let's put ourselves back into heading mode. So I'm going to course 1. It resorts to wings level, so I'm going to press heading mode. And now let's turn ourselves right, effectively west, into a sort of downwind. It's a bit clunky, but I'm going to do this by now scrolling this wheel back around, literally all the way around to west, and then we'll intercept from the south at INS. But yeah, lovely machine, plenty of power once it gets going. In terms of what weight we're actually at, if you're interested for this video today, we've got 48% fuel, and the payload works out about 30%. So very light, those helicopters. I'm sure it should be a bit heavier. Well, maybe not. Maybe airplanes are quite light. It's probably why I can take 3 of them. So what I'm going to do now is let's just sort of start heading back in towards East Midlands. So I'm going to put the vertical speed indicator back to 0, just so it's something sensible when I'm to start it. I'm actually going to slow down a little bit. Let's bring it back down to 400 kilometers an hour. Like I say, we're pretty light in terms of weight, so I don't think we're going to have any issues with this, but we'll soon find out. 400 kilometers an hour. Let's put it into heading mode now. So it's in course 1, so I can take the heading bug and let's bring it round, and we're going to sort of head north initially. Oh, there we go. Quite responsive, as you can see. And let's descend back down to our 5,000 feet or 1,500 meters. So let's put that on here. Now it's a bit awkward now because, as you can see, this does it in ones, so I'm actually going to put 1498 in there. And now if I press H3 and wind that down, the airplane will start descending and the auto thrust will carry on aiming for our 400 knots. Oh, 400 kilometers an hour. Good stuff. Right, now let's get the ILS for East Midlands tuned up, just to show you that you can do this, and it's actually quite straightforward, although you will need to fly the vertical speed yourself. So East Midlands, approach, and we're going to land in, we took off on 09, so we're going to land back in on 09. Bring up the chart here. There we go. 10935 088 course. So let's put that into our box 1. I've already forgotten it, as I always do. 088 10935. So 10935. Course to 088. As you can see, course, again, those tooltips are really important because it doesn't say course in English on there, so that's it definitely helps. 088. Good. Now let's just check that it has worked down here. 088 on the course, which it has, and I can see that there, so that's good news. And what I'm going to do is put land mode on here, and that hasn't worked. What's going on here? Let's leave it on VO1 then. It has been such a steep learning curve here. Now I'm going to bring the heading bug round because we are a long way out. It's not actually registering any DME, so let's start turning the nose slightly towards East Midlands airports. Now you can actually put it into here. So if I put it direct to E G N X. There's East Midlands, enter, and you can see there that we're sort of in the right area for it anyway. So I'm just going to keep dragging the nose around and point it towards East Midlands, and then we'll inset it as we get a bit closer in. So let's put it onto 080 or something like that. Remember, I've got to repress that button now because I've been messing with the lateral modes. So let's do that, and then later on I'll put this to approach for the ILS. So good news, we now have our DME 25 miles out. Let's descend down to approximately 3,000 feet, or I'll do 1,100 meters. So again, put that in there, press the H3, and now it will descend according to our vertical speed indicator over here, which is good news. And then it should level off for us. I'm hoping to see some indications now. So there you go, course is now 088. And the glide slope flag is up, but that will actually clear as we get a bit closer in. In flight simulators, it's often out of line a little bit in the wrong. It doesn't come in as quickly as it would in real life. By 22 nautical miles, you can see it usually in the real aircraft. Whether or not you'd want to use it that far out is another matter. Let's start slowing up then. So I'm going to bring the speed back now to 350. I'm absolutely making up these speeds. If we go to the checklist, I don't think it's going to tell us anything particularly useful like that. Autopilot mode as required, flaps max speeds monitor. Well, we're monitoring that, so yeah, I'm going to close that. Yeah, there's a bit of guesswork going on here, but I think we can get the first stage of flap outs. Actually, maybe not, we're a little bit fast, so let's keep it slowing down. And there's our glide slope indication now coming in here, which is good news. So let's see if we can get this right. So let's put ourselves onto an intercept heading. We're going to level off about 3,000 feet, so that's going to intercept at about 9 miles. So we've got time to slow down. Let's go to our first stage of flap. There you go, yeah, we've got room for that, which is going to help us get the drag out. It's quite tricky to slow this aeroplane down. We're only doing 500 feet per minute with idle thrust, and it's still not really doing it. Quite noticeable. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch this to approach, and then I'm going to press the blue button. I'm going to hope that means it intercepts that localizer and glide slope. I don't think it's going to do the glide slope. Apparently the autopilot in the real aircraft wasn't particularly good at these things either, so we shall see. But I'm going to do my best here. So my current plan is it's going to level off about 1,100 meters, which is now done, and then I'm going to, and you'll see that there you go, the vertical speed rising, or leveling off I should say. Now it's going to slow down quite rapidly. What I'm going to do is hopefully intercept very soon. There it goes. So we're getting a localizer intercept now. You can see it says approach on down here, and then altitude. And then I'm going to leave the altitude in H3 mode by just pressing H3 and hoping it carries on with the vertical speed down. Now what the units are of the vertical speed I'm not 100% certain on. I'm assuming this is 500 and 1,000 feet per minute, which seems normal because it looks like a retrofitted sort of TCAS. But there we go. Let's get that second stage of flap out. See how our speed does for that. Looking good. Again, I don't know what these bugs represent or how we would do them. Yeah, it's pretty much guesswork on my part here. I don't know if there's a way to see that in here. There we go. So, put that on converter. Yeah, glide slope's not available yet, so about 4 miles to go. Let's slow down a bit more. I'm just judging this by the pitch attitude of the nose. If we look here, still pretty nose low, so I think if we get a bit more slats and flaps out, next stage, there we go. And then we can slow down a bit more. Let's come back to 320 maybe? Total guesswork here. But it's, yeah, very pleasant, very responsive. Once you know what you're doing with this panel, like I say, this is for your heading lug. Leave these black guarded switches where they are when you load it up. And you have the autopilot master switch, auto thrust switch. Auto thrust is very simple, it just targets this speed over here. For the autopilot, you then choose what you want. So I've got it in approach mode, but of course would have allowed me to use heading. VOR 1 would allow it to track the VOR. But like I say, I'm not convinced approach mode is going to correctly follow the glide slope. These are some different modes. You can go max, pitch and bank, and you can also get it to circle, but I haven't really used those very much at all. So I'm going to let it join the glide slope, like I say, at about 9 miles. I'm expecting this glide slope to suddenly come in, which it isn't, and it really should do. So I wonder if I did land now. Yes, there we go. So by pressing land now, you can see the glide slope's gone beneath us. So we're actually getting high on the glide slope. Let's press H3 and start down. Let's get the speed back, and let's lower the landing gear. So a bit of an error there on that last approach on my part. So I needed to indeed press land down here. If you leave it in VOR, you don't get the glide slope, it just stays off scale. So by pressing land, the glide slope does come in once we're on it. So 25 kilometers out, let's keep the speed coming back. So I'm going to set it back to sort of 320 knots, or sorry, 320 kilometers an hour. That's really hard to change my mind about. I'm going to wind the altitude up and out the way, because I'm going to want to get it out of altitude hold mode. It's actually climbing, so that's no good. So let's press H3 and put the scroll wheel down. Glide slope's gone way beneath us now, so let's put it to, I don't know if that's 1,000 down, that must be more than 1,000 down. But yeah, we can descend now. Let's put the gear down, because we're going to get fast. I'll use some speed brakes as well, and keep the speed coming back. And we're basically doing a glide slope catch from above now. Putting the speed right back. I put it on that blue bug, I'm not sure what that represents, but there we go. See the glide slope now coming in, so let's see if we can set a sensible vertical speed. Speed brakes in. We'll go full flap now. Auto thrust is in, doing the 260. But as you can see, it's not going to fly the glide slope itself. I haven't figured out a way to make it do that. But what is upsetting is to see it suddenly pitch up. It does seem to have a big balloon with those flaps, and then it's sort of leveled off on us, and I don't know why, or what I'm doing wrong to cause that. But it does seem possible to sort of force it back out again. Must be something I'm doing. It is hard work getting your head around all of this, the automatics here, and you may find it easier to actually fly it yourself, which is what I will do in just a moment. But I'm just trying to show you some of the modes. So we are correctly tracking, we are displaying the glide slope, and now I'm just trying to set a sort of sensible vertical speed. In terms of conversion, let's see what happens if we put in 300. Which is about 161 knots. So perhaps 260 is a bit slow. We shall see, especially as we aren't completely empty of fuel. But we are at full flap, and the nose is sort of down at 0. We are on the glide slope now, so let's put the vertical speed back up a bit. If we're doing 161 knots at, well, 266 we're doing. So let's do lots of conversions required here. 266, which is about 143, so about 700 feet per minute. Pretty standard sort of vertical speed on final. You can see we're actually getting a bit low on the glide slope, and it's getting a bit unstable here. So as you can see, this is supposedly representative of the real aircraft, according to some videos I've seen anyway, that in terms of it perhaps wasn't always the best at flying this sort of approach. I think we're getting there now, slightly low on the glide slopes. Let's keep that vertical speed under control. It is still tracking the localizer nicely for us. It's just going to be pretty active with it. see it sort of oscillating. That could be because I'm a bit slow. It feels a bit slow. Often you see these aircraft approaching nose down slightly, so let's go for sort of 275 kilometers an hour. What I'm going to do now is actually take out the autopilot, which you can do with the normal commands. Let's take out the auto thrust, leave it there. Try and get it back up to that target approach speeds. We've got the glide slope, there we go. Yep, this is the way to do it. This is a nice machine to hand fly. You can see the red throttle control message there above my airspeed, reminding me that I'm now in manual thrust. Now I don't have a trick for landing it. It doesn't have a radio. Well, it does have a radio altimeter, but it doesn't have auto call-outs. So that was done by one of the other crew members, which we don't have with us today, unfortunately. But yeah, really, really surprisingly pleasant to hand fly. Now that looks a bit more natural to me, slightly nose down, but total guesswork there. But it is nice that you can just treat it like a normal aircraft. Use the ILS, and like I say, VOR tracking, ILS is no problem, and you do have that GPS down there, and you can get it to follow the GPS route using the navig option up here. I have managed to make it do that a little bit, so it's got options if you want to actually fly it around. Starting to accelerate a bit, taking the power off. Very cool, really amazing to be flying this around. So just speed a bit high, just correcting that. Now I don't know the landing technique whatsoever, so we'll give it a go. Feels fast here. So I'm going to trickle the power back. Gently in the flare. We are very high up, so power coming back, holding it there, getting those up. There's touchdown. Get the reversers out, get on those brakes. Ooh, bit wobbly. There we go. Love the fan spinning as well. Really needed that for that landing. Welcome back to East Midlands. So that's all for today's video. Thank you very much for watching. In summary, what do I think of this add-on? Well, it is. I think it's very good. It's a unique aircraft, not one I've seen put into any simulator very often, and it's great that we get to see it here in Microsoft Flight Simulator. It is also an easy recommendation simply because the money from it, when you buy it from the Microsoft Flight Simulator marketplace, goes to the Antonov Corporation in support of their efforts to rebuild the 225. So that makes it an easy recommendation from me anyway. I really enjoyed flying it as well. It, like I say, quite light, lighter than I expected, but I have no reason to know what the real aircraft would have handled like. But crucially, it's enjoyable to fly when you get it in the air. It's a fantastic visual model all over. I mean, every angle I get on it, it looks fantastic. The flight deck is good with enough detail in it to be interesting. But it is usable even if you don't know all of the complicated systems, which is really nice, really nice. I'm very glad about that. And we do, of course, get that all-important modelling of the nose gear dropping and loading on cargo, which is great. There'll be plenty more videos and live streams on the channel, so do please subscribe if you'd like to see more. We'll see you again in another video or live stream soon. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.